So I can remember one of the most significant events in my childhood was the Rodney King beatings and verdict. And I'm not sure if you recall, but that happened on April 29th of 1992, and I remember that because that was my ninth birthday. School was closed because things were so chaotic and crazy in the city, and I remember going back to school, and on my first day back, I was walking through the playground, and a student came up to me, and he was really serious, and he just walked straight up to me. He said, "Hey, nigger, your people have ruined Los Angeles." And I didn't know what to say. I just stayed quiet, and I was one of the only black students in that school. So it wasn't unfamiliar for me to hear that word. It was said quite a bit, but to hear it in that context and how serious he was about it, it was really hurtful. And to this day, I can remember that event.
So where were you born and raised?
I was born in Alabama, and shortly after I was born, we moved to South Central Los Angeles with my family. My family's actually from Central America. They came to this country to kind of provide a better life for their family. And we moved to South Central in the 80s. And if you're familiar with that time, it was the foundation of the crack epidemic. It was a time when the entire city, the majority of the city, was strung out on drugs and really struggling. And that kind of fostered a lot of gang violence. It created just some really terrible things in the city. And I can recall being 4 years old, hearing drive-bys, gunshots on a regular basis. There were evenings when we would sleep in the bathroom because our rooms faced the streets. So the safest place for us to be would be in the bathroom at night. And we would know. We would hear gunshots in the morning, and there was going to be retaliatory gunfire at night. And that's kind of what would happen. And from there, we decided that we needed to leave that city, and we moved away from there.
What did that conversation look like in your household with your parents being in that environment and as a child facing these kind of words from kids at school? And did you go home and tell your parents? And what did the conversation look like in your household?
You know, we were pretty much the only, I mean, we were probably 1%. Our family, our race represented about 1% of the demographics in that neighborhood. So it was something that almost like we were used to. And it wasn't something that we felt we could stand up and fight against. It was just kind of like, well, we know we're not that, so don't let it bother you. Don't address it. But unfortunately, it just, you would hear it so often that you began to believe that that's what you were. And it took me a long time to kind of start standing up for myself and telling people, you're not going to call me that. That's not what I am. That's not who I am. And it was interesting. Yeah.
Do you feel like your parents, well, tell me about your family life. Did you have two parents in your home? And with that being said, was that something that they consistently encouraged you on, or was this something that you had to learn on your own? I am not this. I am not these words that you're saying to me. Did you have the support of your parents also telling you these things that people are saying, that's not defining of who you are, that doesn't make you who you are? What did that look like?
I think that with my parents, there was definitely a cultural disconnect because they weren't born and raised here in this country. They were born in Panama. English is their second language.
Okay.
So even to hear that word, that's not something that they would commonly hear growing up as children, teenagers, adults. It's something that was introduced to them once they came to this country. So for me to say, hey, they're calling me this name, it didn't quite have the same effect that it would have for people who were born in the United States or in this culture. So it was almost difficult sometimes to have that conversation with them because I didn't feel like they understood. Because in their professional life, where they worked or whatever they did on a daily basis, it wasn't something that they heard often. So as a child, one kid would hear it and they would call me that, and it was just something that was just perpetuated for a long time. And even teachers and other professionals who were there just kind of would say, well, don't let words bother you, you know.
So you didn't feel like you had people defending you?
No, not at all. Not at all. And then to look around just about everywhere you went and there was nobody that looked like you, you didn't quite feel like you had an ally. You had a lot of people who were nice to you and people who were friendly with you, but there was never quite that connection you could make, because it's like, well, you're going to go home to your family that looks like you and has this culture, but I still am going to go home or deal with this on an everyday basis. And there's only really so much you can do for me to protect me from the people who want to be mean. You know, it's always difficult being the only everywhere you go. It's like walking through a crowd with a spotlight on you in slow motion, and you know that everybody's looking at you and you're just wondering, what are they thinking? Do they like me? Do they not like me? Do they hate me? Do they want to hurt me?
So, as far back as you can remember, you felt like you've been living in a spotlight.
Yeah.
And has that always been uncomfortable?
It's always been uncomfortable, like I said, because you don't know what people's perception of you is. You can't read minds. There's always telltale signs of, yeah, this person is trouble. Like, I might not want to be here. But for the most part, it's a way of life. It's what I've gotten used to. You're never comfortable with it, but it's just your normal.
Can you tell me what those telltale signs are?
You can always tell when someone's just not nice to you. And you can tell when you're not being treated the same way that somebody else is being treated. If you're at the grocery store or you're ordering food or something like that, and you see the interaction between two people, and this person's cordial and kind, and then they come to you and they're short, a little bit rude, and maybe some of the things they said or their tone, even the cadence and the way they talk is just kind of uncalled for. And you just kind of think like, yeah, there's a disconnect here. They're treating me differently, and I can tell. And I can try and be nice and say maybe they're having a bad day, but I think we both know what the answer to that question is.
Have you ever addressed that with someone that you've gotten that vibe from? Do you ever say anything or address the issue?
I haven't, because it's not just being the only, you also feel outnumbered. So your worry and your concern is, if I start something with this person, if I react, if I lose my temper, who's going to rally around me to stand up for what's right? Or are they going to look and see the angry black man, getting upset, getting aggressive? Are they going to call the police? Are they going to gang up on me? What's going to happen? Is that a risk that I want to take, or should I just kind of cut my losses and walk away?
Which is what you've learned to do.
Which is what I usually do. Yeah.
And you've been doing it your whole life. Okay.
Yeah.
So, this is Cleveland Harvey.
Yeah.
I'm Michelle Smith, and we are starting a project called Project Listen, with the hopes that we can just hear, with all of the noise and all of the opinions and thoughts that are on social media and on the television and just in our face and in our ears all the time. It seems that there's just a great need to have a real conversation with a real person and look them in the eye and ask questions and then listen, so that we can have a better understanding of what's going on in our society and our culture right here in Sonoma County, California, and maybe just find ways and ask hard questions so that we can have avenues or feel more empowered to love people better and to open doors and just bridge a gap between races and within our church walls and outside in our community as well. So, do you have anything you want to add to that?
No, I appreciate the opportunity to speak my story and tell my truths. I think it's important to know that what we're hoping for is empathy and not sympathy. I don't want anybody to feel bad for me or to pity me or anything like that. I think that I want to be humanized, and I want to feel like I have allies in my community, people that want to talk to me or ask me questions, people that I can go to when I need somebody to speak with. I think that's my hope.
Can you tell us what you do for a living?
Yeah, I'm a social worker with the county. I work in child welfare, and that's something I've been doing for almost 2 years now. I interact with the community. I see some things that are, a little traumatic, but for the most part, I've been trained and I work with a wonderful group of people who we do our best to keep the kids in our community safe at all times.
Hmm. All right. Let's see. Let's talk about maybe our desired outcome and vision. Like Cleveland said, we definitely just want to encourage empathy and just a greater understanding. In a lot of ways, I realized Cleveland is married to one of my very best friends, and we've been best friends since high school. And she is white, and I went to their house and asked them how they were doing with all the things that are going on and with the riots. And it really quickly opened my eyes to the fact that people aren't asking. They aren't calling their friends up and asking how they're doing, and seeing how this climate is affecting real people and real relationships and real families. And so we just kind of wanted to open the door. As I talked to Cleveland and Abigail a little bit in their home, I realized there's a big gap here of people being fearful to ask, how are you doing? Hey, you're married to a Black man. What does this look like for you? And it was not uncomfortable, but it was a stretch for me to be there and say, hey, Cleveland, what does this look like for you? And how does this affect your family and your life? And so we just want to open the door up to help people feel confident and capable to ask questions to the people that are in their own lives and have a conversation and listen and empathize and learn. We all have something to learn. So here we are, and we just want to listen and have conversation and learn more about what's going on and how it affects people.
I know you said it was uncomfortable for you to ask, but it wasn't at all uncomfortable for me. It was almost a relief to have somebody ask, how are you doing? And just that small phrase, it really goes a long way to ask someone how they're doing and give them that platform and an avenue to speak and just tell you, I am okay or I'm not okay, and I'm not okay, and this is how you can help. Mm-hmm. And it was really, I really appreciated that.
Are there any other ways that you feel like we can help? What are the best ways right now in what's happening here as a friend? Mm-hmm. So like in my situation, walking into your home and asking, what are ways that someone like me for a family like you could be supportive and be just long pause but just support you in what can we do to make a difference?
I think it's definitely a complicated answer to say what can you do to make a difference, but I think the most simplistic thing that I can say is the same way that you would see any other family who might be struggling, or if you see signs and symptoms of maybe things just aren't well or they just need a little extra support, I think that's what's needed, just to provide that support and provide them with the resources, or let them know that there are resources to help them for whatever it is that they feel, and let them know that the church is there for them. Mm-hmm. When you're ready, we are here, because I think to be in a place where you need help and you don't know if you can look to your left or your right, and there's there'll be anybody there, is very hard. But to know that there's someone there if you fall, or if you're not having a good day, or if your family is struggling in the community, that's a start. And I think that's where that should be the launching pad, is just to support those around you who you feel might need that.
Well, and I want to take a stretch and say that you don't necessarily even know when you walk into a church if that's a safe place for you, right?
Absolutely.
So as a church body, I think, and that is one of the goals here too, is to say, hey, we as a church support you, and we want to bridge the gap. We want to be a safe place where everybody knows that they can come and be cared for and loved and listened to and hopefully feel understood, or at least seen. And it's helpful for us to even know that we have to say that out loud
Mm-hmm.
in order for people to know that they really are safe there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's good to hear, because I think sometimes, and this is something that I realized in our conversation, is that the silence is really hurtful. Way more hurtful than asking a super awkward question or saying the wrong thing because you care and you want to know. The silence hurts deeply. And have you been shocked by silence on different accounts, and what has your experience been like that?
I think I have been pretty shocked by some of the silence because I can look on social media, I can hear what's going on in the community, and I can see a lot of people being proactive in getting involved with Black Lives Matter, or wanting to patronize Black businesses and things like that, and being very vocal about it online. But when it comes to looking to the person next to you, the person you work with, the person who's your neighbor, there has been silence, and there hasn't been that person saying, "How are you doing?" So it's just interesting to kind of juxtapose somebody being vocal in social media or around the community, but not actually putting those words into action and talking to the person who they know in their life is actually dealing with the problems that they want to remedy.
Yeah. Okay. So say something.
Yeah.
Right?
Something,
Say something,
yeah.
even though it's awkward, even though it might feel uncomfortable. Say something to the neighbor, say something to the friend, say something to the relative, call them up and say, "How are you doing? I'm thinking about you. Is there any way that I can be supportive?"
Exactly. Yeah.
Are there any specific things that you feel like, or maybe even some language around that, where you could help empower people to know exactly how to ask that question? Let's say I were to call you up. I mean, I did this in your household, but what's a tactful, thoughtful, and loving way to ask you how you're doing because of the climate of everything right now?
How are you doing? How are you doing? Something as simple as that. It doesn't have to be this eloquent, articulately phrased introduction to somebody. You just ask them how they're doing and truly give them a space to tell you how they're doing. And if you ask how they're doing, you have to actually want to know how they're doing. And if they say, "I'm not doing well," or "This is what I need," be willing to provide that. If you're going to actually put yourself out and ask how they're doing, be willing to support them.
Yeah. Okay, so if I were to call you up, which I would never call you up because you're a man and I would call your wife, but when I called Abigail, I had to specify not just how are you doing, but how are you doing in regards to the climate of what's happening with racism right now. Is that a good way or an appropriate way? Because I think I don't think it's clear if someone just calls up and says, "How are you doing?" They might not know that you're specifically saying, "Hey, I'm acknowledging that this is a big deal for all of us, and that I'm thoughtful and mindful of you in this circumstance, and I'm thoughtful and mindful of me as a white person engaging in our community and our society, and I want to know how I can be supportive of you in this time." So is there a more specific way?
I mean, you can vaguely talk about the culture and what's going on, and just say, I see what's going on in the world, in our community. How is this affecting you? What is it like? How do I put this? So now I'm kind of stuck.
I know it's tricky.
Yeah, it's tricky. But
what if we said, "Hey, I just wanted to check in with you and see how you're doing in regards to all of the let's see, it's so tricky."
Yeah. And
I don't know what I said to you.
And it really doesn't have to be that tricky, because I think if you, it's almost implied when you ask somebody in this culture with everything that's going on, "How are you doing?" And you give them that space to talk about it, they're going to know, "I want to know how you're doing in regards to this." Or you can just say, "There's been a lot of things in the news. There's been a lot of things going on in the community that have bothered me and that have pained my heart. How do you feel about it?"
There you go. Yeah.
How do you feel about it? How has this affected you? Is this something new? Is this something that you've been dealing with for a while?
Mm-hmm.
And let them talk to you.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good.